I've been thinking a lot about relationships lately. Like, what even makes them work? Is it just attraction and chemistry, or is there more to it?
For sure, attraction and chemistry are important, but they're just the start. You need compatibility too, you know? Like, do you actually vibe on a deeper level?
Yeah, I get that. But what about emotional intelligence? I feel like that's such a big deal.
If someone's not emotionally available, it's like talking to a brick wall. You need that connection where you can be vulnerable without feeling judged.
But being vulnerable is so hard sometimes. What if they don't get you or, like, use it against you?
That's where emotional safety comes in. If you feel safe to open up, it's a game changer. But you also gotta set boundaries, you know? Like, don't let someone walk all over you.
Yeah, boundaries are key. I've seen so many people in toxic relationships because they didn't set them.
And without mutual respect, it's just a mess. Like, how can you build anything if you don't respect each other?
I think shared values are huge too. Like, if you don't want the same things in life, what's the point?
But let's talk about the fun stuff. Like, do you believe in love at first sight?
I think that's just infatuation or puppy love. Like, it's cute, but it's not real love.
Yeah, I feel like real love is when you fall in love over time, you know? Like, you're head over heels because of who they are, not just how they look.
But what about the honeymoon phase? That's like the best part, right?
Oh, 100%. When you're smitten and everything's perfect. But then comes the power struggle phase. And that's where things get real.
Ugh, the power struggle phase sounds exhausting. Like, why even bother if it's just gonna be a fight all the time?
Nah, if you make it through that, you hit the stability phase. And that's where the magic happens. Like, you're solid, you know?
Yeah, and then comes the commitment phase, right? Like, you're all in.
And if you're lucky, you get to the rekindling phase where you keep the spark alive. Like, it's not just about staying together, it's about growing together.
That's deep. Do you think lifelong partnerships are even possible anymore?
I do, but it takes work. Like, it's not just about everlasting love, it's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard.
I guess that's what makes it real. Like, it's not just a fairy tale, it's about building something that lasts.
And honestly, if you find someone who gets you, who respects you, and who you can be vulnerable with, that's the dream.
For sure. Here's to finding that emotional safety and connection, I guess.
Cheers to that.
But wait, what about all these other types of relationships? Like, what's the deal with platonic relationships?
Oh, platonic relationships are great. Like, you can have a platonic partnership where you're super close but not romantic. It's all about that deep friendship vibe.
But then there's friends with benefits, which is like, what even is that?
FWB is tricky. It's like you're friends, but there's also physical stuff. But it's not a situationship, which is even messier because it's totally undefined.
Ugh, situationships are the worst. Like, just tell me what we are.
Right? And then there's open relationships, which can work if everyone's on the same page, but it's not for everyone.
Oh, long distance relationships are a whole other level. Like, you really gotta trust each other and have solid communication, or it's just gonna fall apart.
True. And what about co-parenting relationships? Like, how do people even make that work? Speaking of commitment, what do you think makes someone ready to tie the knot?
That's a big one. I think it's about loyalty and devotion. Like, are you willing to stick by each other no matter what?
I feel like it's also about being a match made in heaven, you know? Like, you just get each other.
Totally. And it's not just about the big moments, it's about the everyday stuff. Like, do you have true companionship? Can you be each other's soulmate?
I do, but I think it's more about building that heartfelt bond over time. It's not just some magical thing, it's about unconditional love and choosing each other every day.
That's beautiful. But what about when you're not ready to settle down? Like, what if you're still figuring things out?
That's okay too. Not everyone has to rush to be a fiancé or fiancée. Sometimes it's about finding yourself first.
I guess it's all about timing and being honest about what you want.
And when you do find that person who feels like your match made in heaven, it's worth the wait.
But you know what's wild? All the stuff that can mess things up, like jealousy and insecurity. Those can ruin even the best relationships.
Oh, for sure. Jealousy is such a toxic emotion. It's like, if you don't trust each other, what's the point? And insecurity just feeds into that.
And then there's arguments. Like, everyone fights, but if it's constant, it just breeds resentment.
Exactly. And resentment is like a slow poison. It just eats away at the relationship until there's nothing left.
And what about betrayal? Like, cheating or lying? How do you even come back from that?
It's tough. Some people can work through it with forgiveness and reconciliation, but others just can't get past it.
Yeah, and then there's rejection. Like, putting yourself out there and getting shut down, it's the worst.
Totally. And sometimes that leads to separation or even divorce, which is just heartbreaking.
But I guess if there's emotional baggage from past relationships, it's hard to start fresh, you know?
And then there are intimacy issues. Like if you can't connect on that level, it's hard to keep the spark alive.
And don't even get me started on self-sabotage. Like, why do people ruin good things when they finally have them?
Right? And then there's love addiction, where people just jump from one relationship to another without ever really being single.
Don't forget zombieing, when someone who ghosted you suddenly comes back like nothing happened.
Haha, yeah. And then there's catfishing, where people pretend to be someone they're not online. Like, how do you even trust anyone after that?
And what about love bombing? Like, when someone showers you with affection just to manipulate you.
Ugh, that's the worst. And then there's the whole issue of power dynamics in relationships. Like, if one person has all the control, it's just not healthy.
It's like relationships are this minefield of emotions and challenges. But I guess that's what makes them so rewarding when they work.
It's all about finding that balance and being willing to put in the work.
Oh, and speaking of modern dating, what's the deal with all these terms like bae and boo? Like, is that just a cute way to say partner?
Bae and boo are just playful nicknames. But then there's ship, like when you really support a couple being together.
Like, when you're totally rooting for them.
Exactly. But then there's thirsty, like when someone's desperate for attention, or thirst traps, where people post pics just to get likes and DMs.
Thirst traps are so obvious. And don't even get me started on ghosting. Like, just tell me you're not interested.
And then there's breadcrumbing, where someone leads you on with just enough attention to keep you hooked.
That's the worst. And what about simping? Like, when someone does way too much for their crush.
And then there's simp nation, where it's like a whole group of people obsessing over someone.
And don't forget stans, like people who are so obsessed with someone, sometimes even romantically.
Yeah, but then there's ride or die, like when someone's super loyal no matter what.
That's goals. But then there's flexing your relationship, like when people show off their partner just to prove something.
And then there's sliding into DMs, like when someone tries to start a private conversation out of nowhere.
Netflix and chill, which is like a casual hangout, but with romantic intentions.
Don't forget DTR, define the relationship. Like, when you finally have to figure out what you are.
That's always awkward. And then there's cuffing season, like when everyone's trying to find someone to be with during the colder months.
There's low-key crushing, like when you secretly like someone, or high-key obsessed, where it's super obvious.
Catching strays, like when you get dragged into drama you didn't even ask for.
Oh, that's the worst. But hey, at least we're all figuring it out together, right?
Speaking of nicknames, what do you think about all those cute ones like Sweetheart, Honey Bunch, and Sugar Plum?
Those are adorable. Like, who wouldn't want to be called Cutie Pie or Pumpkin?
Right. And then there's Darling, which just sounds so classic and romantic.
What about my person? Like, that's such a deep way to say someone's your everything.
Yeah, and then there's Cuddle Buddy or Snuggle Muffin, like, who doesn't want someone to cuddle with?
Oh, and Love Bug is just the cutest. Like, you're so in love, you're practically a bug.
You know what they say, love is blind. Like, sometimes you don't see the red flags because you're so into someone.
Yeah, and then you end up wearing your heart on your sleeve, and it's like, ouch, when things go wrong.
Nothing's worse than breaking someone's heart. Like, that guilt is just unbearable.
True. But sometimes you can kiss and make up, and it's like everything's okay again.
Yeah, and then there's popping the question, which is like the ultimate commitment move.
Oh, and when you hit it off with someone right away, it's like magic.
There's the dreaded friend zone. where you're stuck just being friends.
And then there's burning bridges, like when you ruin a relationship so badly, there's no going back.
Yeah, and being the third wheel is just awkward. Like, why am I even here?
And when a relationship's on the rocks, it's like, can we fix this or is it over?
Relationships are such a roller coaster, but I guess that's what makes them so interesting.